Well, Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to episode 20 of EV Society's Canada Talks Electric Cars webinar. My name is Tim Burrows, and I'm going to be hosting again this evening. So the title of today's episode is How Canada Could Lead in the EV Space, and we're really delighted to welcome back for the second time on our series, Cara Clairman. And Cara, as you know, is president and CEO of Plug and Drive, a nonprofit that is accelerating the deployment and adoption of electric vehicles. Cara has taken Plug and Drive really from an idea to a thriving nonprofit and is a recognized leader in EV space. She has over 20 years of experience working in the environmental and sustainability fields, including 12 years working at Ontario Power Generation, initially as OPG's environmental lawyer, and then later in the role of Vice President of Sustainable Development. And prior to joining OPG, Cara spent 5 years practicing environmental law. She holds a Bachelor of Laws from Osgoode Hall and a Master's in Environmental Studies from York, as well as an Honors Bachelor of Science degree from Queen's. Cara is the 2017 recipient of the Women in Renewable Energy's Women of the Year Award. She currently enjoys, I think she's still driving her Tesla Model 3 and enjoys that very much. So Cara, welcome back to the webinar.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
We're the lucky ones. We're the lucky ones.
I'm a Happy New Year, everyone. I think this is for most of us the first day working. So welcome back. Hope everyone had a bit of a restful holiday. And I'm just going to jump right into it because I want to make sure there's lots of time for questions in this talk, because a lot of what I'm going to talk about, I was watching the chat and I know there's a lot of experts on the line, so I hope we'll hear from some of them while we're in the Q&A period of the talk. So I'm going to just spend a couple of minutes up front because there's always some people I think who join who maybe are not, as informed about EVs, or maybe they're new to the group, just to cover a few basics, and then we'll get into the main topic, which is, how Canada could lead. Which of course implies that we're not leading right now, which we're definitely not. Most of you folks in this crowd, especially the EV Society current members, know that the reason we're even talking about electric cars at all is because of the great emission reduction potential that they offer, and the reason this is so important is, of course, because transportation is one of the largest emitting sectors. Here in Ontario, it's number 1. These stats are Ontario stats, but Canada-wide, it's number 2. And in many jurisdictions around the world, it's number 1 or number 2. So we really can't achieve our climate goals if we don't tackle transportation. Of course, EVs offers a really great solution. Of course, it's no silver bullet. It's not the only solution. There are many, but it's a really important one, and that's what many of us are spending our time on. And just to sort of cover the main reasons why EVs make so much sense, of course, because you're plugging them in for the most part at night. You're plugging in many jurisdictions across Canada into that clean, low emitting electricity. Here in Ontario at night, it's mostly nuclear and hydro. Of course, there's numerous provinces across Canada where it's hydro exclusively. Quebec, Manitoba, British Columbia, pretty much all hydro. And then even in Alberta and Saskatchewan, where there's a fair bit of coal on the grid, we actually still see a pretty good emission reduction from EVs because, well, a couple of reasons. It's not the entire grid isn't fossil fuels, like even in Alberta and Saskatchewan, it's like around 60 or 70%. And then, of course, a coal plant or natural gas plant is much more efficient than a small ICE engine. So for all those reasons, actually, you still get about a 25% emission reduction, even in the fossil fuel more predominant fossil fuel electricity state provinces. And so, here in Ontario, for example, you're going to drop your emissions by more than 90%, even more in Quebec and Manitoba, etc. So, such a huge opportunity. And of course, many of us who are working on this, as much as, yes, you could say, okay, it's happening. The market is growing. It's not happening fast enough. And if you agree that we're in a climate emergency, we have to speed it up. So that's why groups like Plug and Drive, like the EV Society, like Electric Mobility Canada, we're all working to try to accelerate the adoption of EVs. And I think for a long while, we used to hear a lot of reasons why not. There was, well, there aren't, there's not a make or model that I like. I'm waiting for a truck or SUV. I'm a fan of Toyota, for example, and they didn't have one. So there were all these reasons that people had. The make and model reason is really dropping off as a reason. And now with more than 50 makes and models available in Canada now, recognizing they are somewhat difficult to get in some provinces, but they are available. And so that sort of make and model problem, or that there isn't one that somebody wants, is really going away, in my view, as an issue. And we're not going to see that issue a couple of years from now. And then, of course, there was the always discussed range anxiety that was a big concern for people with the early EVs. I myself owned a 2011 Nissan Leaf, and on the best possible day, it got about 130 kilometers of range. That was great for the city, and I wasn't driving far most days. So for me, it was great. But I think for a lot of people, they were really concerned about that. Well, I honestly think 2 years from now, we won't hear about this issue much either, through a combination of, the range of the vehicles really improving, battery capacity really improving, combined with lightweighting and all these things, with cars typically with, I'd say on average 300 kilometers, but many on the market with 400 or 500. And then, of course, the build out of public charging just helps give people confidence. So I really think that the range issue is going to disappear pretty quickly as a primary barrier to adoption. And then, of course, the one thing that I think a lot of people just didn't know and are just starting to wake up to is the savings. We've been talking for years about the environmental benefit, but I think maybe we haven't done as good a job explaining to people the cost savings, where, electricity here in Ontario, it's about 1/4 to 1/5 the price of gas. In Quebec and Manitoba, it's like about a seventh. So, on average, a driver who drives the average, which is about 20,000 kilometers a year, saves about $2,000 a year in fuel alone. So, and then of course there's maintenance savings and all sorts of other savings. So, these are sort of the business case issues around EVs. And just before we get into it, just to make sure we're all on the same page, I wanted to go over it because I know not everybody has been dealing with these issues for a long time. And if you're new to the EV space, I want to make sure that you get that the business case is there today. And adoption is obviously growing, but we need to do everything we can to speed it up. And then I just want to spend a minute or two on Plug and Drive and who we are. I know a lot of you know us, and we certainly appreciate all the support that we get from the EV Society and other groups that are online tonight. We're a nonprofit as well. We're out there trying to accelerate EV adoptions, primarily through education. And here we are at the EV Discovery Center when we launched in April of 2017. So we've been around at this center for almost 5 years, but Plug and Drive's actually been around for 10. And prior to having this sort of bricks and mortar, we were out there on our EV Roadshow, basically doing public events, pop-up events at malls and fairs and festivals, and anyone who would take us really to show off the cars and chargers and try to give people test drives, because we knew early on, we learned that the test drive is the key, right? That's the thing that convinces somebody to make the switch. And so that's been a big focus of our work, and still to this day is probably the primary thing that we're doing. Is as simple as it sounds, just trying to get butts in seats and get people to make the switch. This just gives you an idea of the center. If you haven't visited us yet, please do come out and and visit us. We have been open throughout COVID on an appointment only basis. It's very COVID safe because you're just going to be the only person there, or you and your significant other. And you can test drive cars. You can learn all about EVs with no pressure to buy anything. And of course, the great advantage of having all the brands there is you don't have to travel all over Hell's Half Acre to try a few different brands of vehicle and figure out which one suits your lifestyle the best. And of course, we had this lovely event venue for board meetings and workshops, etc. Not been a lot of events this year, and fingers crossed that 2022 will be a little bit better. Not looking so good right now, but let's hope it's short-lived. If you are thinking about hosting something, maybe by the spring, give us a call. We'd love to host an event, board meeting. We've had all kinds of groups, everything under the sun that you can think of at the center, and we love to do that. And finally, we had a really fun new project that we launched actually in the fall of 2020. We had this all running all through COVID, which is our mobile EV education trailer, or MEET. It's the mini Discovery Center on wheels. We started in Ottawa for 2 months in the fall of 2020. We bring it to the community with a bunch of cars to test drive. And this past summer and fall, we were in Durham region for 6 weeks in the summer, and then we were in Surrey, British Columbia all fall. We have bookings for next year in the spring in the Maritimes, in Alberta, and again in Ontario. If you would love to have the MEET in your community, let us know. We love to come. It's a 2-week minimum just because it's kind of a big deal to set up. But that way people get a real opportunity that a 1 or 2 day test drive just can't match. So this way we're in your community for a few weeks. People can sign up and come at their leisure, learn, test drive, and hopefully make the switch. So, so that's us. And, we're working hard at it. It's still, I would say it's still, you think it's getting easier, but it's still a slog. There's still lots of people who aren't ready to make the switch or think that they're not ready. So I know that members of the EV Society out there, you're all out there talking to your friends and neighbors. Keep it up, because people still need a lot of help to get over their concerns. So every little bit really helps. I know you've all probably convinced at least 1 or 2 people, but keep at it. We have a lot of work to do. One thing you can let people know, we did launch a new tool on our website this year early. I think it was in January. So it's almost a year it's been there. But one of the things that we found that people didn't understand was total cost of ownership. They didn't really understand. They see that sticker price of the EV being more expensive than the gas version, and they just are put off right away. And they don't really fully understand all the savings that go along with EVs. And when you tell them, oh, but you're going to save about $2,000 a year, they don't necessarily accept that. So we launched this tool on our website where you can enter in your exact current gas car and compare it to an EV on the market. It will show you your monthly savings, and it will be based exactly on your specific driving, your commute, etc. So if you have some friends that aren't convinced, to send them over here and tell them to check out this tool. They can calculate their savings for themselves and see that there's a big economic benefit to be had. Okay, now I want to talk to you about Canada and how Canada could lead. I want to give a shout out to Electric Mobility Canada here, who helped provide some of the slides that I'm about to show you. I'm just going to start with how Canada's doing. And, I would say overall, not great, but not bad, considering, we're a big country and we have different policies in every province, and we've had a hard time getting cars, etc. These are the stats from, the middle of 2021. We don't have current stats yet for the end of the year, but, we were up to sort of close to 10% in British Columbia, 9% in Quebec. Pretty good. Obviously, Quebec and BC have the best stats because they've been running their incentive program the longest, which stacks on top of the federal incentive. So that's really obviously helpful. They also are putting in their own ZEV mandates. And what I mean by that, if you aren't familiar with that term, is it's like a requirement that if you want to sell gas cars, you have to sell a certain percentage of EVs as well. And that seems to really be helping. Now, a few other provinces have put in incentive or rebate programs like PEI and now in the Maritimes, and you see their numbers going up as well. You see Ontario not doing so great, mainly because we lost the rebate, I believe in 2018, and we saw a big tank of our purchases, and it's been clawing back slowly, but we're still far behind Quebec and BC for that reason. And so, you know, we need to do more in some of these provinces where there isn't a rebate. And of course, some sort of consistent program across Canada would really help. Because what's happened as well is when you have a really great incentive program in Quebec, for example, the automakers will take all the vehicles for Canada and send them to Quebec and BC, and the rest of Canada can't get any. And so that's been really problematic for the non-incentive provinces. So it's great that there are these provincial incentives. I support them, but we really need something consistent across the country so that all the provinces can benefit. So this is just to show how we're doing. Now let's compare that to how some other jurisdictions are doing. You know, we were up to, you know, now this is a little bit out of date now. This is almost a year old, but up to sort of 7.5 million cars worldwide. Where are most of those? Well, most of them, half of them are in China, but a quarter in Europe, and about, you know, a fifth in the US. Canada would stand around 10th in this list. Again, okay, but not good enough, not good enough. So, you know, if we want to be in amongst the leaders, we have to do a lot more. And here's just a bit more information about who's leading in the recent past. We're seeing a big surge in EV purchases in Europe. We saw this year, we saw Germany hitting almost 30% by the end of the year of 2021, and the UK and France 22, pretty good. China still around 20, but because the population is so big, they still sell the most. So obviously they're, even like when you take into account population and everything, they're selling just a lot more EVs than we are. And so we have to do a lot if we want a leadership position. And of course, we haven't even talked about the leader, which is Norway. And most of you know Norway, with their combination of incentives and disincentives for buying a gas car, which is the main thing they do. They put a very high tax on gas cars. And they also provide a whole bunch of other types of incentives for EVs, like free driving in the HOV lane, free parking in Oslo, and all sorts of other things. You see by the third quarter, fourth quarter of 2021, selling more than 90% electrics. So incredible. So it's not like we don't know what has to happen to make it happen. Other people are doing it. We could do it. We're just not doing it. And so we have quite a few lessons we can learn from these other folks. Now, a bunch of us who participate in Electric Mobility Canada got together, primarily our government relations committee there, to talk about, well, what would be like a really ambitious policy for Canada to actually achieve a leadership position on EVs, because there seems to be an interest in it, but we just aren't necessarily implementing the right policies. And so we worked on creating a program, what I'll call EV action plan is what EMC is calling it. Plug and Drive was one of the first to endorse it. I know a number of others, organizations that are on the line are supporting it as well. And if you haven't had a chance to take a look at this, I really encourage you to look at it. We're all, of course, EV boosters, but we actually all believe that 100% EV sales in Canada is possible by 2030 if we were to do all the right things. It would take a lot of changes, but it's not impossible. And so I'm just going to spend a few minutes on what we're recommending in that policy and then get into a few more details. And then I hope that you will ask a lot of questions. I think I saw that Danielle Breton's on the line in this talk, so he might be able to chime in as well on answering some questions. But we all, as part of EMC, believe that this is achievable with the right policies in place. So it's a six-part set of recommendations. If you go to the EMC website, you can get more detail on each of the six. I'm going to cover the highlights, and there's a lot more information available. But basically, we are recommending sort of a suite of policies, because we can't just tackle one or two of these things. If we really want to lead, we have to tackle all, which include a really significant suite of incentives and policies around consumer adoption for light duty vehicles, which includes incentives, which includes a ZEV mandate, which includes education and awareness. So all need to be done as part of the light duty adoption. And then we also can't forget that a big piece of the transportation emissions come from medium and heavy duty, as well as even off-road. And so we recommended a suite of initiatives that would help to encourage electrification of medium and heavy duty. And as I mentioned, you click on there and you can get a whole bunch of more information. Of course, another recommendation, really probably obvious one, is we have to do a lot better on our national infrastructure. Some of the provinces have done a really great job. Quebec and BC are way ahead on their infrastructure. Ontario's actually isn't bad, but we have a lot of singles, and so we still have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of remote areas that have nothing. So there is still work to do. Now, I will tell you, as an EV driver of 10 years, I think it's so much better than it used to be. And for most of us, if you're in the, if you're traveling the Windsor, Quebec City corridor, it's actually quite easy. But it's when you get more remote, it does get quite tricky. And so there's still a lot of work to do on infrastructure, as much as quite a bit has been done. And I do want to recognize actually the federal government's ZEVIT program, because that has actually really helped with infrastructure. And now we're seeing actually a lot of networks putting out their own chargers even without ZEVIT funding. So lots of improvements being made, but still lots to do there. And then, of course, there's still a bunch of other policies and programs that are needed. So we still have a lot of supply problems, as I've already mentioned. We need to really work on sort of a coordinated, efficient strategy for vehicle availability, which is going to include that always controversial ZEV mandate. I think, we heard at the end of the year from the Minister of Environment and Climate Change that he's ready to do it. So I'm optimistic we're going to get that in the early part of 2022. I hope so. We included in this suite of policies something on the manufacturing and jobs. You've heard this. It's a huge opportunity for our country and for the economy. This isn't just about the environment, and we're actually seeing quite a good progress on this particular item. I'm sure you've all heard that GM, Ford, and who was Chrysler, now Stellantis, have all made announcements on manufacturing EVs right here in Ontario, and we're hearing more and more on mining and minerals, supply chain, parts suppliers. Like, we have an opportunity to really take that whole network and be a big part of it. Many of the rare earth metals and stuff that go into batteries are coming from overseas and not necessarily from countries that we necessarily want to support. And so if we could bring those local, that of course reduces the carbon footprint. and also ensures that environmental laws and health and safety laws will be followed in the process. So big opportunity for Canada here. And you know what? 5 years from now, this opportunity, we're going to be too late. So this has to be now. And finally, the federal government has a huge role to play, and not just what it's doing on incentives, which is great. It needs to do that. There's a whole bunch of other areas, and actually I'm going to get into it in the next slide, of things that the federal government can do to lead. It can take a leadership role with its own fleet. It has a massive fleet. It has hundreds and hundreds of buildings for infrastructure. It has a lot of opportunities to do more, and it can do more. And we need to strongly encourage, push, do what we can to get them to do more, especially right now where I think we have a very open ear, I would say, with the current federal government. I see there's a bunch of things in the Q&A, but I think what I'll do is my talk isn't too long, so I'm going to get to the end, Tim, and then we can do the questions at the end, if that's okay.
It sounds good, Cara.
Okay. So, I mean, we have, and when I say talk about all we need to do, I do want to recognize all that is being done. And so this is not at all to say that we're not making progress. These are just some of the networks that have, exploded across Canada just in the last few years. And we're just seeing massive growth in charger installations. Yes, we still need to do more, but we really should recognize how much has been done. It's quite astonishing. Those of us who've been driving around in EVs for quite a while, I mean, it's amazing. The thing we need to do now is make sure we don't have too many singles, because that can be problematic if one goes down, or we don't want people waiting in lines. And putting them in more strategic locations. I think one of the things that has happened is sometimes we have, someone had property and so they put it there, but it wasn't necessarily in a location that really makes sense for EV drivers. So I think we have to really do a bit more thinking. I was thrilled to hear the announcement just before Christmas that Ivy made with our provincial government to put chargers at all the en routes. We've been lobbying for that for years. Glad it's finally going to happen. That's like a critical location. So things like that, being very strategic about where we put them, and we're seeing this happening more and more across Canada. So to sort of sum up where we're at and what we need to do, like I said, infrastructure good, but it's not good enough. We need to push for a lot more, and I know we're going to get more ZEVIP funding in the next year or two. It can't just be that, though. We need to do more than that, and we need to get the automakers in on the game. More and more they are. We see Electrify Canada. We hear announcements from GM about installing public chargers, so that's all good news. And so everything we can do, we need to do. As I mentioned, I think our manufacturing is looking pretty good. Huge opportunity in mining and supply chain. We haven't quite got that figured out. I know there is a group affiliated with EMC that is working on it. We need to support them and do more. Education. Look, there's a lot of groups trying to do it, including mine. We're small. We're not well funded. I mean, there's only so much we can do. We can't put on television commercials. And so Canada can do a lot better to encourage its citizens to make the switch. And then just a few other things that I feel have been forgotten and really need to get back on the agenda in terms of policies we need. We hear tons of talk about incentives, and we hear tons of talk. It's always focused on new. I think we really have to push our government to fulfill its promise to incentivize used EVs. First of all, it's hard to get a new EV right now. It's hard to get a new any car right now because of everything that's going on with the chip shortages and other supply chain issues. Used cars are around, and we need to incentivize the used EVs. They're affordable and available, and we can get a whole different demographic into EVs. And we know people that own EVs, their next car is also going to be an EV. And so we need to start them with the inexpensive cars and move to the new cars if and when they might be in that market. So I really feel used is really, really important, both for equity and for encouraging people while it's a hard supply market right now. Another area that's super easy to address, and I don't know why our governments haven't done it, is the building codes. All the provincial building codes are different. And for example, here in Ontario, you can still build a condo building with no chargers in the garage. That's actually criminal. I mean, if you want your building to be around for 50 years, how could you possibly build it without consideration for EV charging? So, I mean, we really need to push for the building code to be changed, that it must be installed. And my view is Vancouver got it right. They had an install of 20%, but rough in for 100%. The rough in is so cheap. Just rough it in and then it's there and you can put the stations in later. And so I hope we do have a national building code in this country that can influence all the provincial building codes. So we need to get that one changed to influence all the other building codes across the country. Another area that for whatever reason hasn't been addressed is financing. The financing for EVs still kind of stinks. And we need a big bank to step up and offer a very progressive financing option for EVs. Why for an EV do you pay more for financing? Why is it like 0% for all sorts of other cars? And we can't seem to get like an affordable option for a new EV. So that's an area that I think we really need to get someone to step up, and then they'll all step up. And finally, we do need this, I have to say, for a long time, I never took a position on ZEV mandate because, I thought, okay, if they send us the cars, we don't need a ZEV mandate, but we're not getting the cars. So it looks like we do need the ZEV mandate. And I understand, and to give, credit to the automakers, I understand like there's a big shortage on, but they have got to address it. And you see that the vehicles do go to the jurisdictions that have the ZEV mandate. So, I mean, if we want to get the cars, we're just going to have to do that. And unless, they can come forward with some sort of program or some other supply side policy that guarantees that we'll have the vehicles that we want to buy. So that's sort of what I had in mind for what Canada needs to do to lead. As a nonprofit, I'm sure Tim, you will understand, and the EV Society will understand, you always have to thank your sponsors. So I really want to thank all the folks who support Plug and Drive. We really couldn't do it without them. And this has been a hard year for everyone, a year and a half, almost 2 years. And they've stuck with us, even though obviously we weren't able to do as many test drives as we used to do, given all the shutdowns and such. But we thankfully were able to get back into business this past summer, and hopefully we'll be able to be going like gangbusters in 2022. So I just really want to thank each and every sponsor who helps us do what we do. Without them, we couldn't do any of it. So thank you for your attention. I actually look forward to a very feisty Q&A session, and I hope many of you will weigh in.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Cara. So I am going to pass things over to the very capable Laura Bryson, one of our favorite EV Society members, to take you through the questions, Cara.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks so much, Cara, for the talk. There's tons of questions that came in, so we'll jump in here. And for those who aren't familiar with it, there is an upvote feature. So if there's any questions that you'd like to see answered, please just do the thumbs up on it, so it'll move closer to the top. So we'll start with a question from Roger. Curious to know about Canada's mining companies' EV battery support from the federal level in 2021. What's your take, Cara?
Well, we haven't seen like huge support yet. There's a lot of talk about it. We've heard a lot of talk, for example, here in our province of Ontario from the provincial government, but I haven't seen a lot of action. So I'm hoping in 2022, we're going to see money where the mouth is, because certainly there are a bunch of, mining companies here, for example, and in Quebec, but a lot of them are smaller startups. A lot of them are not well established and they need help. So I'm hopeful. I mean, we certainly are positioned well. We do have some of these minerals and metals in our country. I just hope we can get our act together in time to sort of capitalize on the opportunity. Because as I said, I think a few years from now, you know, supply chains sort of get set and it'll be too late.
Next question from Ken Shields. The question of affordability comes up when we suggest to people in Northwest Ontario, as they typically think Tesla when they research vehicles. Is there an EV only buyer's guide for EVs available in Canada out there with specs such as price, range, cost of ownership?
Yes.
And it sounds like you did speak to that in your
Sure.
slides.
Sure. So Plug and Drive has all of the makes and models with all their specs on our website. So that's one thing, and that's up to date, you know, kept up to date. But also Daniel Breton wrote a book that has all, like, if you'd rather see it in book form rather than online, he's got a great book that covers all the makes and models. Of course, you know, you got to find the book, and he's online, so maybe he can tell you where to get it. But you know, our website is a good source. And then of course, I would really strongly encourage you on the affordability issue to look at used. The best places to look are Auto Trader and Kijiji. Honestly, that's where you're going to find the most used EVs, and you'll be surprised. I know the used prices have gone up a bit because of the shortage of new, but there are still quite a lot of available and affordable EVs, used EVs on those websites.
Awesome. And I know you had a PDF on your website in past years with a comparison of all the different vehicles. So maybe something like that would work for Ken for your shows.
It's there.
Awesome. Next question from Michael Bedencourt. What's the latest on the potential for increasing federal or provincial incentives this year? The Ontario election is in June, which will likely bring an incentive-friendlier government. So is it wise to wait?
Oh boy. Well, I wish I had a crystal ball, Michael Betancourt. I don't know. You know what? I would not hold my breath that this current provincial government will put an incentive. My impression is they won't. They won't. For sure on new, they won't. They'll do other things now. I believe they're going to do some other, I mean, they made the announcement on the infrastructure at en route, and I think they'll make other infrastructure efforts, but I really would be surprised. Now, as you say, we could get a EV friendlier government, but we might not. There was a survey recently that showed there's a lot of still support for Doug Ford. So I don't know about that. Certainly, you know, I think it's up to all of us to push these to become election issues, you know, because Del Duca did come out with his platform and it's in there. And we heard the Green Party has it in their platform, etc. So that we need to use that to maybe push the Conservatives to be more aggressive with their EV policy and their platform. That way, whoever wins, you know, we're going to get something positive there.
Absolutely. Next question from Barry. As more and more owners switch to EVs, how will provincial governments recoup the money not collected through gas pump taxes?
You know, this is a very important issue, and it's not one we can brush aside. I think in the early years, we kind of brushed it aside because we were like, hey, there's so few, like, what, you know, don't tax us. And we want to encourage people to buy EVs, and we don't want to add another tax. On the other hand, you know, kilometers driven is a system that is some jurisdictions are going to, so that everyone pays their fair share of road tax. There are other ways around this. For example, if there's a carbon tax, you know, you increase the carbon tax and some of that money goes towards roads. And then EVs are avoiding the carbon tax, and, you know, so you're paying for it through fossil fuels. Now, I don't know how popular that will be amongst gas car drivers, but that's another way of funding the roads. We do have to figure it out, no doubt about it. We can't say it's just not something, but right now my preference would be not to put it onto the EVs, because that's just going to be another discouragement. And if we really want to encourage people to make the switch, we have to figure out another way to raise the money for roads.
Question more about Plug and Drive, the organization. Can you tell the audience about Plug and Drive's current funding sources? I think you sort of alluded to that with your sponsorship page.
Yeah, so you see it on the last slide, maybe you wrote that question before. So most of our funding, we have very little government funding. We have a little bit of funding from NRCan, but most of our funding comes from utilities, from automakers, and from charger providers. I would say those are our three main. Then a few miscellaneous others. We have a bank, we have, CAA, a few others, but don't fit in any of those categories, but that would be the bulk of them.
And from the same person, the follow-on question is about, I guess, how changing politics has impacted Plug and Drive.
Yeah, it has. What can I say? I'll be honest, look, it did. I mean, I think it impacted any group that is working on climate-related issues when the Ford government came in, because they canceled all, the whole carbon tax scheme, which was funding a lot of climate-related initiatives, including Plug and Drive. So we were getting some money from the provincial government then, and that was canceled when the Ford government came in. So we did suffer. Fortunately, we, I got some good advice, to when I was setting up Plug and Drive, to diversify, not to have all my eggs in the government basket. And so I never did do that. And thankfully I didn't, because we have a lot of other funding sources. And in the end, we were just fine. But it wasn't an easy, year, the year that we lost that. But, I would say now to anybody setting up a not-for-profit or charity that, just be careful never to put all your eggs in one basket, because that even a private funder can go away. So just good to be prepared for those kinds of things.
Definitely. Thanks for sharing that, Cara. Next question from Sebastian. As the level of government the closest to people, what do you think municipalities can do to help out with the acceleration of EV adoption?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's interesting. There are a few municipalities actually giving incentives. So they can get involved, and they can actually, some of them have a very progressive local building codes, like for a city, for example, like Vancouver has that. And the city of Toronto has the green standard, which isn't it's a voluntary building code standard, but it helps. So, cities can do things like that. They can make it mandatory that all the buildings that get built are to a certain standard, including having infrastructure, for example, for EVs. So that's a really positive thing. They can also do things in their parking. They have a lot of parking lots. So that's another thing municipalities can do. And finally, municipalities can do a lot on the educational front. So for example, like we're working with the city of Toronto to do some things in 2022 to get the word out. And our mobile unit was partially sponsored by the city of Surrey when we were out in BC. And so cities can, get involved and help fund educational initiatives, either their own or those of other groups. So there's like a whole bunch of things municipalities can do. And because municipalities have set these, some of them have set carbon neutrality goals, and that means that they have goals that they want to achieve. So doing something pretty specific on transport is going to be helping them hit those goals. And so they actually have that kind of incentive to take steps. And so, you can start to see municipalities across Canada doing it. It's quite inconsistent. Like some are doing a lot and some aren't really doing any, but we're starting to see it more and more.
Great. We've got a pretty detailed question here from Adley. So let me try to break it down here. But so he's summarizing the three largest barriers to EV adoption. He's saying it's not necessarily so much whether EVs are available to consumers, but that three factors must be true to increase EV adoption: affordability, public infrastructure, and consumer education or consumer awareness. In order to tackle all three of those items, would you agree that if something like a vehicle scrappage program was in place, more consumers would have an incentive to get their ICE vehicle off the roads?
Maybe. Look, we're offering a scrap right now in Ontario, and I know BC has it. So we could try to see what difference that's making. Now, our scrappage program is just if you buy a used EV and scrap a gas car, you get an extra incentive. So, but we're not seeing like huge uptake of it. So we see a lot of uptake of the used EV incentive, but quite a small uptake on the scrap and the used EV incentive. So I'm not sure if it will. I agree with you that affordability is a huge issue because, as someone else mentioned, a lot of people just believe EVs are very expensive, even without looking into it. And they're not thinking of the total cost of ownership and the savings over time. So that is a huge issue. Public infrastructure is a huge perceived issue. Those of us who are EV drivers know that it's not as big a barrier as people think, but they think it. So it does actually prevent people. So I agree with you, but and all those are in our action plan with, like, if you go into each of those on the EMC website, you see like more details of what we're recommending to the government on each of those. And I agree, we got to tackle all of those.
So is your interpretation that the folks that are taking advantage of that used EV incentive, they're maybe keeping ICE vehicles as well in their household?
Yeah, it could be. It's hard for us to know. We just, like, because the scrappage is $1,000, it could be that like their car's worth more than that, so they're not really willing to scrap it for $1,000. So the scrap price might have something to do with it. You know, in BC they get a lot more for the scrap, and so you know, we might look at their program and see like how effective is that. Now, the automakers actually love the scrappage, right? They really want that. That's a program that they would get behind because, of course, it means people buy a new car. So they like that. So I think you would see kind of a unified, you know, automaker support for a program like that.
Okay, great. So we've got a question now from Roger on disincentives. Do you think a disincentive for buying a non-EV in Canada would fly?
Yeah, you know, I don't know if any government has the guts for that. I mean, it takes a lot of guts to do that. Like, you see, Norway did it, right? And Norway puts a massive tax on gas cars, so gas cars actually cost more than EVs cost in Norway. And I doubt we'll see that in Canada, honestly. I don't see any government really having that kind of courage. But it would be great. It would be great. And I think we could do other disincentives. Like, there's some simple stuff, and our governments haven't wanted to do this either, but you know, toll roads, for example. If you put a toll on roads coming into a city and then exempt the EVs from the toll or half the toll or whatever, you'd see a big change. You'd see a big change there.
Next question from John Stonier. Do you have any concerns that EV mandates in US states and the Buy American policy will limit availability of EVs in Canada?
Yeah, I do have concerns about that. Well, I mean, it's sort of, I'm a bit torn because I guess most people have probably seen that Build Back Better plan has not been passed. And right now it looks like it won't pass in the US. And that's the one that has the EV Buy America thing in it.
Right.
So for now, that's not happening. So I'm I'm sorry I'm sorry that whole thing didn't pass, because there's a lot of other climate related stuff in there that I think all of North America and the world will benefit from. Like, I wish that would happen. On the other hand, I wasn't too thrilled with that Buy America thing. I was hoping they would change it to North America, because our auto market is so intertwined. Like, it's impossible for us. It's a huge problem, honestly, if they do go ahead with that. Canada would have to match it with the same thing, but even then it won't help us that much, because we sell so many of our vehicles into the States. It would be a big problem. So right
Definitely.
now we're not going to be faced with it for now.
Follow-up question from the same person, John. Will we have enough domestic EV production to meet our demand?
Not initially, no. And there's lots of brands that just aren't going to be made here that people will want. So I would say probably not. I mean, it's still great though. I mean, we should still want it. We want them to make them here. That's great for jobs. It's a great economic policy, but it's not an EV incentive policy. Like, this is where I think the government has it a little bit wrong, like the provincial government, because they're sort of talking about manufacturing EVs as part of what they're doing for EVs. But it isn't really. What it is it's an economic policy that's good for jobs and it's good for our economy. But just because we make them doesn't mean people will buy them. It doesn't mean that at all. Like, there's if nothing goes along with it to encourage people to buy them, they won't. So I think we need to do both, right? We need to really do both. And I think thinking that just making them here is going to magically get people to buy them is probably wrong.
There's tons of questions, so just thinking through which ones to pull up next. There's a question from Valerie about EVs in the media. She's asking, why are some journalists still writing negative articles about EVs? And how do we encourage more?
Why? I don't know why. It's getting better. It's a lot better. Like, honestly, a few years ago, I was writing letters to the editor, like constantly trying to correct things and stuff. But it is getting better. I mean, it takes a long time to get people off what they believe. And, you know, I don't know. I wish I understood it myself. I mean, I think now you'd see most auto journalists kind of accept it as it's going to happen. Now what you get is like, well, it's going to take a lot longer than that. And it's more about the timing now, and about, you know, people be driving gas cars for a long time. I don't think necessarily that has to be the case. But I think, yeah, I wish I knew, Valerie. I do though. I think though, anytime you see it, we have to call them on it, and it is slowly changing.
Question from John related to the federal rebate. Do you have a sense for what proportion of EV sales have attracted the federal rebate?
A lot. So the rebates work. And we're seeing, you know, of course, they only apply. I mean, the downside of our rebate program is they only apply to a vehicle that's base price is $45,000 or less. So, but what we are going to see, and not to like, okay, so now I'll make my prediction and we'll see if I'm right. I mean, we're definitely hearing rumblings that, you know, there will be some new EV incentive program designed so that the trucks and SUVs will qualify somehow. Now, we don't know how, but we know that they're more than $45,000. So we know there has to be some modification to that program. So I think we'll see that in 2022. I really hope so.
Yeah,
but,
like maybe
in terms of what proportion have got the rebate, I don't know. I don't have those stats. It's actually really hard to get stats. We used to have a great system of getting stats in Ontario because of the green plates. And they were they knew everyone who was buying an EV, and they asked you what make and model, and they had all that information. They even knew which municipality you were in. And so you could get a breakdown by municipality, how many of all the different brands of EVs were in which municipality. And, but since they canceled the rebate program, they don't really collect that information anymore. So it's really challenging to figure this all out.
I think we're going to have to just do one more question.
Sure. Yeah, I saw a bigger picture question I wanted to pull up here. Um, there was a question from Terry, so that we'll leave off with here. Exactly how do we truly influence these changes to government policies and mandates?
Well, that is a great question. So here's what I would recommend. Okay, so you can join up with groups that are doing it. So that would be the EV Society and EMC are both, they write letters, they lobby governments, they are pushing for the policies. So you can do that. You can also write to your own MP and MPP. When they get a letter on a topic from one person, they know that there are at least 20 people who feel the same way but haven't written the letter. So when they get one, actually, you don't think that, oh, it's just one, it doesn't mean anything. It does mean something to them because they know most people don't write. So do that, and you can tweet at them. You know, if you don't want to write a whole letter, you can do it on social media, and you tag the government and let them know that you care about it. Those are just a few ways you can do it. These groups are all pushing, and your support really makes a difference.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Cara. I think we maybe need to rename this sort of tough talk from Cara Clairman. Direct talking. Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely fabulous.
Yeah.
It's actually quite refreshing to hear somebody who sees what really needs to be done and calls it out. So thank you for that. And thank you for coming back. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you for having me. And for those of you who maybe wanted to ask questions but didn't get through, you can contact me either Twitter's Plug and Drive Twitter, or you can find me on my website. There's an email address if you wanna ask more questions.
Fabulous, fabulous. All right, and thanks, Laura. Always awesome. You had your,
thank you, Laura.
Yeah, you had your work cut out for you today.
Thank you both so much.
Yeah, yeah. So I have to leave with a really special announcement. Don't tune out for a couple more seconds here. I want to share with you that next month for the webinar, we have a special treat lined up, and we will be inviting and hosting Professor Jeff Dan from the Department of Physics and Atmospheric Science and the Department of Chemistry at Dalhousie. So most of you will know Dr. Dan's name. He's recognized as one of the pioneering developers of lithium-ion battery, the battery that's now used worldwide in laptop computers and cell phones and a lot of different devices, of course, including electric cars. He'll talk about the advances recently made in modern lithium-ion batteries that can enable more than 1 million miles of driving and many decades of battery life. But here's a catch. At Jeff's request, the episode will not be recorded. So you will need to attend this particular episode live if you want to hear it. And certainly, of course, if you want to ask the professor questions. So mark the date down, February 1st. It's always 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but it won't be on the YouTube YouTube playlist after. So you got to be there live. So thank you all for joining us on today's episode, and from all of us at EV Society, and until next month, stay well, and remember to stick to all those New Year's resolutions if it's not too late. This concludes today's webinar.